everyone, and welcome to my festive tech calendar session on Give the Gift of PIM this Christmas. I'm Charlie Gough, and I am a senior cloud security architect for Open Systems based in the UK. I'm also the co-founder of the Microsoft Cloud Security User Group, which runs usually on a Thursday in the UK and is all virtual. So I run that alongside my colleague Chris Wright, and you can also find me on Twitter under the hashtag or under the of Get of Me Land, and at the bottom is my link tree. So this session I'm hoping to be informative and really talk about the benefits of PIM and how easy it is to enable it within your environment and what you need to be able to enable it. There's also a short demo in there, which I've just pre-recorded. So let's get on. So what is privileged identity management? So we hear, or PIM as it's known. So really kind of what it does for most organizations is previously we've gone in, we've given a user admin privileges, and they've stayed there. Even if you go back to the days of on-premise domain controllers, we'd give our admin users either a secondary account and we'd give them domain admins or the relevant least privilege. So what PIM does is, in the cloud, you can give active assignments constantly, permanent active assignments. But the question is, should you? And when you start talking about zero trust and some of the principles around zero trust being least privileged, least privileged access, and that then leads into kind of always verify as well. So verifying access and whether the access is actually required, and fundamentally just in time access and just enough access come into those elements really heavily. So PIM within the Azure AD environment or Azure environment really covers two key elements. It covers Azure AD roles and Azure RBAC as well. So you can start securing your organization's privileged identities with eligible accounts. So ensuring that a user can still do their job, but rather than just having access at the end of their fingertips, they can just log in and they have to elevate their account into that role. They have to verify that they're that person, verify that their account isn't breached and it's not malicious actions happening. So it falls into multiple categories, and we'll delve into more as we go through this session to kind of understand how it works, what you can do with it, and actually how you implement it. So on a high level, that is what is PIM. So we kind of already touched on it, but why use it? Why do we need to use PIM? So let's put it this way. If you're an organization, the biggest challenge at the moment is reducing that risk. The risk of breach. We're hearing more around MFA fatigue attacks with Uber attack, or the Uber breach recently, or the second Uber breach recently, which was around that. But so that's around the malicious actor being in your environment, getting access to your privileged identities and then exploiting them to create their own identities and to then take control of your environment and fundamentally your data and your assets. Secondly is we're all human. We all make mistakes. And how do you protect your organization from the insider piece of making mistakes, or even insider risk, in terms of an employee that may have just left the organization or be leaving the organization performing malicious actions, or inadvertently performing an action because they've clicked something they don't know. Now, from that perspective, with PIM, you're looking at very much a case of kind of trying to restrict that level of access to actually make your privileged users make a conscious decision to elevate their permissions up into that privileged role. So rather than constantly being assigned it, they have to consciously make the decision, put the justification in to actually move to that role. And that is one of the key reasons for using PIM. It reduces the attack vector and the exposure time, because fundamentally users should only activate when they need to use that role, and it protects your sensitive assets, or all your assets really, within the cloud environment from somebody clicking the wrong button and potentially making a mistake and then causing further outages or a configuration issue that may not be noticed for a period of time just by going in and checking something. So that's really the key reasons for using PIM more than anything. So what does it do? So realistically, what does PIM do? So we've already touched on some of these points, but we'll go into a bit more detail. So it gives you the ability to have that time-based and, if you want, approval-based role activation to, again, mitigate risks, whether that's unnecessary permissions, misuse access permissions on resources, or excessive permissions. So that's something else to really consider. So what does it do? It really kind of gives you that, just as we've already talked about, just-in-time access. So you have to elevate the role when you need it, rather than it just being click of fingers and it's there. It allows you to actually put time constraints on it, so that you've got some, as an example, global admin role. There should be very limited use cases why you need global admin nowadays, and especially why you would need it anything over, say, 8 hours. Generally, if it's a service account needing it, then look at a service principal and look at actually what that service account needs. And this is where the least privilege conversation comes in more and more, is understanding what the roles can do, what level of those roles, what kind of actions can a user commit to and do within those roles. And I'm not just talking about RBAC within Azure, I'm talking about Azure AD as well. Because if you're doing device admin, you don't need global admin to do that. You can go in and do that with the device admin role. Same with kind of security admin. Unless you're making security changes, potentially you could get away with security operator. Or even if you're just going in to read, security reader. Same with global reader and global admin. You may just want a user to have the ability to read the permissions rather than making the modifications to the change. The other things PIM allows you to do is it allows you to put an approval in place. So for global admin, as a prime example, if you've got a user you've got a global admin account and you've got users that are eligible for it, they can't just click it and go, hey, I'm global admin. Because if that user gets breached, or their account, or rather than the user breach, the account gets breached and compromised, a malicious actor could come in and create multiple global admin accounts before you know it. Now, that gives you the opportunity to control approvals. Now, approvals are a double-edged sword because they can slow things down. So you could ask for an approval for something because you need to make an immediate change. And the person or the people that are approving are not in the organization that day. They may be traveling for work. They may be out on vacation. Number of reasons. So you've got to be very, very cautious with approvals. The next is you can enable MFA. Well, in theory, you should have MFA on all your accounts. You should have conditional access in place. But asking a user to have to go in and prompt and press activate or accept on a notification, or even further go for a phishing proof MFA type like a FIDO2 key, where the user has to physically go, this is me going in doing that role. So enabling MFA on certain roles is critical. Then you've got the justification. So the bit you don't get with a permanent active assignment is justification for why the user is using that role. So even in your early stages, let's say you gave your IT ops team or your SecOps team security admin or global admin, because they say, well, I can't do my job without it. They have to put a justification in. They have to justify why they need it. Now, that gives you an opportunity to gather that data, gather that information, review it, and actually go, but you could do the same job with this role, or you could do the same job with that role. So don't necessarily see it as a quick win to start get everyone into least privilege, because it's not. You can build that case over time with the justifications. In addition to that, you can get notifications. You can get notifications which tell you when those privilege roles have been activated, when somebody's assigned that privilege role, whether it be eligible or permanent, so that you can start tracking it. Because suddenly, if you get 5 alerts saying I've got 5 permanent role assignment or permanent active role assignments that been enabled, then realistically, you've got a question to start asking yourself to go, actually, is something more fundamentally happening here that I need to look into? So it gives visibility, it gives clarity onto the situation, it gives you a bit more exposure than what you currently get. Now, the next is around the access reviews. Now, we all know what happens in environments. People get given, and this happens in Azure especially. I've seen it in Azure AD, less so, but Azure primarily. People go, consultants, third parties get given, oh, right, I need to come in, I need to do something, I need contributor rights to this Azure resource because I need to do this, and this. Those permissions never get used again. They get used for, say, a month, and then they go stale. So how do you get around that? You can get around that with an access review. So you can turn around and set up an access review for that permission, whether that's a role within RBAC or whether that's a role within Azure AD. You actually get the user to go and say, yeah, I need that. And they have to put a justification in. So again, if they've not used it for a period of time, you could get them to do it. Or you could just intermittently do it. Or one-time piece where you get that active. You can check the access and check that people have the access they need to do the job they need to do on that basis. Because fundamentally, if they don't need it, you can remove it. It adds risk having those, even with an eligible role, it adds an element of risk. So removing it is better in the long run, because actually it takes 5 minutes to add the role if the relevant people are there. So removing it, fundamentally, if it's not been used for 6 months, makes sense. And then linking back to kind of the justifications, the notifications. If you've had a breach, you can go in and get the audit history. You can find out who activated. You can find out who activated the role. Now, it's not for witch hunts or anything. It's detection and response. It's understanding what activities. It's education. It's education to your users to go, look, we know you activated your role. What were you doing there? What was that you? And just giving that education and that visibility really makes a big difference. Then finally, the one bit it also does is by activating PIM, it means that you can no longer remove that last active global admin and privileged active role assignments. So it prevents that in place, which obviously, again, protects your tenant. So we're going to dive into a demo now. We're just going to quickly go through actually how you go and activate. So we're now going to dive into the demo of Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. So you access the Azure AD Privileged Identity Management console via the Azure AD portal. So by going into Azure AD, you can search for Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. This brings you to the Quick Start menu. You've also got the option to have a look at what's new, but the Quick Start menu, which gives you on the left-hand side tasks, which are your user accounts tasks, manage, which is obviously your Active Directory roles, activity, and troubleshooting and support. So if I quickly go to roles, my roles, I can see what I have assigned to me. So I've got no eligible assignments, but as I'm in as a global admin, as a main admin account for the tenant, I can see that effectively I've got an active assignment of global admin, and I can see that that is a direct membership and it is assigned and permanent. So it's not going to expire. And I can't deactivate the account either, because if I deactivate the account, it's just not possible to do that, because it's my account that I'm working in, obviously. Expired assignments, there is nothing under there because I haven't got any. So going back up to the level, we're going to mainly concentrate to start with the Azure AD roles. So within Azure AD roles, you've again got the similar menu down the left-hand side with tasks, but you've also got roles, assignments, alerts, access reviews, discovery and insights, and settings, which are under the manage element. So let's start and have a look at roles. So to start with, and I've gone in and configured some of these already. So to start with, if we go to the Global Administrator role, we can see that we've got a role here under eligible assignments called Santa. So this is a direct membership. It's not part of a group. It's again for the directory, and it's a permanent assignment in terms of it's not going to expire. It's not going to ask for say, do you still need it kind of thing. Now we can go in and we can remove that from here, or we can update. So if we delve into Santa a little bit further, Santa's role a bit further, we can see that it's permanently assigned. We can go to update and we can go, right, let's change that to active or eligible. We're going to keep it on eligible for this scenario, because you don't want to have your named users as being actively assigned to the global admin role, at least. So there's some roles where there's value in doing that. There's others that actually having it as eligible and having the user step up into that role is more important. So going back up to global admin assignments, we can then view the active assignments. So under active assignments, we've got my current account, the mod administrator account, and then we've got a Microsoft service account, which is acting as our break glass account. So in this scenario, both these accounts would be, or in a corporate scenario, both these accounts would be break glass admins. And the reason why I say that is, from a break glass perspective, it's really critical to actually, how can I put it bluntly, to have those accounts as permanently active assigned, because if your tenant gets breached and you've got other restrictions on the role, which we'll go into in a second, then it means that actually you won't be able to get back into your tenant. So these accounts are critical to protect your tenant and your data really from potentially a breach. There are alert sets that you can put in place as well to alert when these roles actually do get logged in, so you know. And there's obviously, like any disaster recovery plan, there's testing that would need to be required. You could protect these accounts further with something similar to a FIDO key, just to give you a multi-factor authentication option as well. As otherwise, the multi-factor authentication will be tied to somebody's mobile phone or another method. if we then delve into kind of the role description, this talks about global administrator and what actually the role can do. And you'll see, obviously, one of the things we all know is global admin is effectively God admin for your Azure AD tenant. So that also includes the elements within your Microsoft 365 tenant. So Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Teams, and those elements. You can go down here and look at all the details around that role and what's involved in that role, and what that role can do. So you can actually see the granularity of the global admin role. You then have the option under role settings to then actually define how long somebody can actually be active for. Now, in this scenario, we've seen that Santa is an eligible activation. Now, I haven't had a chance to set up MFA on Santa's account. So what I have set up is, usually this would be set to 8 hours. So we've reduced the maximum duration down to half an hour. On activation, we can select whether we have Azure MFA or none. In this scenario, I'm going to remove the MFA requirement because I haven't currently got it set up on my tenant. Do not do this in your own tenant because it would be crazy, because MFA is critical and I'm a big advocate for it. But in this scenario, I'm just making this change. In addition, we've got required justification on activation. So this element of the justification on activation is around having to put a reason, an auditable reason why you're activating that role. So that is critical in the sense of tracking why somebody's made their account eligible. We've also got required ticket information on activation, which we could set. So if you had a ticketing system, something like ServiceNow or Zendesk, or where it had a ticket, you could ask for a ticket reference, why the user's gone in to do it. Now, it's key to note at this point that this is a global setting, so it would prompt everyone to do it, and it doesn't ask for a format, so anybody could put anything in. So you've got no validation on it, but that comes down to your internal processes more than anything. Then finally, the next stage is require approval to activate. So this is something that in a production environment, I would seriously consider, depending on the size of the organization. Because it means that, let's say Bob, who's an IT ops manager, needs to go in and make a global change, and they require global admin. Now, in theory, very rarely should that be required, because we should be able to do it through. You are able to do it through through a multitude of roles, with the principle of least privilege being considered. So you could set this to require approval, meaning that effectively Bob would need to go and talk to, let's say, the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, or the head of IT, or somebody in a more senior position would have to go, yeah, I'm happy for Bob to activate his role. Now, in an operations standpoint, that might be the engineers doing the work and Bob doing the approval. Or it could be just one of your colleagues approving it. But it requires a two-piece approval. So the first being the MFA, the second being the justification, and the third being somebody else clicking approve. Meaning that nobody can just, if your account did get breached for whatever reason and you were eligible for global admin, you couldn't just go, right, approve. I'm just going to make my account eligible straight away and approve. So we'll just hit next on assignment. So under here, we've got two options: allow permanent eligible assignment and allow permanent active assignment. So if we go to allow permanent eligible assignment, what this allows us to do is put an expiry on the current eligible assignment. So 15 days, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year, meaning that they would have to go for an access review every set amount of days, which could be useful on the global admin account, especially if it's required for a limited piece. In this scenario, we're going to tick it and go allow permanent eligible assignment. And same with permanent active assignment, you could say, well, actually, we need this in place. You can also require MFA to ensure that an active assignment is created. Something that I'd recommend to do in a production environment, especially because fundamentally nobody should be going in creating global accounts which are active assignments. And finally, you've got the required justification on active assignment as well. So again, to assign that level of active assignment to an account, you need to put a justification in place. Finally is notifications. So this is where kind of auditing and logging comes into play. So role assignment alert, notification to the assignee, and if an approval is required. This tells you can set multiple email addresses here. You can have the default recipients. You can configure this however you like to actually alert the people that you need it to alert. So in this scenario, potentially, if you want, whenever somebody was assigned the active role assignment, so a permanently assigned active role assignment, you may want your CISO to get that alert. You may want the head of IT to get that alert, to say, just to wave a little flag to go, look, somebody's gone in and done that. Something suspicious here. So that is a good kind of prompt. Obviously, emails can get lost. It's not the be all and end all, but fundamentally, you've got the ability to set the right notifications up there. So just going to hit update because we made the change for the MFA. And then we'll delve into assignments. So under here, as you can see, we've got global admin, which is Santa's account, which is eligible, and we've got Chief Elf, who's got the security admin role, again as an eligible assignment. Then under active assignments, we've got global admin and our break glass account, the service account, and then we've got no expired assignments. So there's a couple more options here that you can go into. So access reviews, you can go in here, configure an access review to actually review everyone's access on a regular basis, either one time, weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually. You can set a duration, so you can say, well, the access review is going to be every 14, I think that's every 14 days, or going to last 14 days, and it needs to end by a certain date. You can set it set it for all users and just really inactive users, and then select the role that you want to do it on, and whether it's permanent, active and eligible, or just eligible and active. You can set your reviews as well, and then you can have the ability to auto apply results. So if a reviewer doesn't respond, you can set remove access or take recommendations. There's further advanced settings, so show the recommendations, require reason on approval, mail notifications and reminders. And you can add additional content into your reviewer email. So we're not going to go and set up that because mainly we don't have the time to properly show that and demo that today. And then under here, you can kind of go in and see the actual settings that have been changed and who's changed them and when. So that's quite handy from a kind of seeing whether the default role settings have been modified in any way. So we can see that today I've gone in and updated the various elements. And you can then go and see actually what has happened, who's done the task, etc., and made the relevant configuration changes. So on that point, I'm now going to switch over and go to sign in as Santa and uplift my role. So we're signing into Azure AD. So we're going to sign into Azure. We're going to go, so we can see that we're signed in as Santa, and we're going to go to Azure AD Privileged Identity Management. So now what we're going to go and do is, because Santa is currently, if we go to my roles, he's got no active assignments, no expired assignments, but he's got his eligible assignments. So if we try to go to assign a role or do anything really under his account, we can't do it because we're not a global admin. So we're going to need to go and activate his role. So we go into my roles and we're going to go global admin and we're going to hit activate. Now we can select under here you can select a custom start time. So you can say, well, actually I don't want to be I know I have a change request coming up at 3 o'clock this afternoon, so I'm going to set my role to be activated during that time. I can't change the time, so I can't increase that time. However, if this was set to 8 hours, I could reduce that down to say, well, actually, I know my change is only going to take 30 minutes, but I'll give myself an hour to actually do that. And then we can go in and we can put our reason. So we've got 500 characters. So this is where good practice comes in and teaching your team on how to implement good practice. So change request for testing PIM. So we're going to activate straight away. We've got a duration of half an hour and we've got change request for testing PIM. And we're going to hit activate. And that will now go off and it will activate the role. So it will tell you that effectively it's processed a request. It's now validating that the activation is successful, which hopefully we should get a tick in a second, which it's now validated. And then it validates that the activation has been completed successfully. And then it will automatically refresh my session to show that my active role's changed. So I'm currently active with I can go in here and I can see I'm activated and it ends at 11:47 today. So I've got half an hour to do the element I need. So as you saw through the demo, you can actually go in very quickly and enable enable PIM. Get it configured for what you need. You can start tweaking things if you want to, or when you want to. But fundamentally, going in and just shifting permanent role assignments to eligible and changing the mindset of your privileged users will help you in the long run. It's not there's quick wins in there, but it is the start of the journey to actually enhance your hygiene around your privileged identity piece. Now, finally, what do you actually need? What do you need to be able to enable PIM? So the first thing is you need Azure AD P2 premium P2 licenses. Does that mean for your entire environment, every single user, if you've got 7,000 users? No. You only need them for really the following categories. The first is users who have an eligible or time-bound assignment within Azure AD or Azure RBAC. Users who are members or owners of a privileged access group, which we'll go into at a later point because it's still in preview. users who are able to approve and reject activation requests within PIM, users who are assigned to an access review, and users who perform an access review. So what does that look like in real sense? And how do guest users count within that? So if you've got guest users, you need one Azure AD P2 license if none of your other users are PIM enabled. So you can add your guests into PIM. You can ensure that they have to elevate up into their privileges up. And you can do that through the Azure B2B monthly active user rights, which you get about 50,000 users, I think, each month via guest user accounts. For, let's say you've got an IT department of 10 people, of actual technicians, consultants working on your environment. All those, and they all have an Azure AD role assigned to them. All those 10 people would need a license, an Azure AD P2 license, if they're an eligible time-bound assignment. Now, let's say you've got a compliance team or a security team as well that want to perform access reviews and approve it, reject. Let's say there's 5 there. You would need 5 licenses for them as well. So you're looking at 15 licenses. So actually, from a cost perspective, it's not huge, depending on the size of the organization. For the value it adds for you as an organization, it's invaluable. Now, for the small cost. Now, obviously, a lot of pushback comes from the SMB space because of the 300 user for business premium. You would need to purchase this on top of that. If you've got an M365 plan, say, and I'm looking at the E5 Security or E5 Full Suite, you're looking at the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite E5, you'd be looking at, it's included within there. The G Cloud, it would be included in there. So the G5 suite, the A5 suite, it would be included in from the faculty side, as well as the frontline workers SKU as well, the F5 SKU. Azure AD P2 licenses are included there. So that kind of gives you a good idea of what you need. Now, there's a load of documentation that is available on PIM through Microsoft Docs. I believe there's Learn courses as well through there. But my recommendation to you is to give the gift of PIM this Christmas to your security teams. It will enhance your posture straight away around your privilege role, and it would make great sense from that perspective. And so, with that, thank you. I appreciate your time today, and Merry Christmas. Have a great Christmas break, and look forward to catching you all in 2023, which just seems to be around the corner and gone really quickly. And hope some of you will join us at the Microsoft Cloud Security User Group in the new year and meet up with you within the community. So once again, thanks and Merry Christmas.